Justin Fields deserves to be benched, but benching Justin Fields is not the right move for the Jets. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We have a busy show today. We're going to talk about why the Jets should not bench Justin Fields despite his recent poor play. We're going to talk about how this Jets offense will look without Garrett Wilson. Hint, not very good. We'll talk about whether it's time for fans to stop supporting this team with their dollars until the Jets start showing improvement. We'll talk about so much more. It is our weekly mailbag show. Each Wednesday, we try and do a mailbag with listener questions. And let's begin. Our first question today comes from Drew, and it's about Justin Fields. Drew writes, "Hey, John, would you please help me understand why Fields is not getting benched? Is Glenn trying to win games or just not hurt Fields' feelings? Last game, we had negative passing yards, gave up 9 sacks, and had a quarterback who's afraid to throw the football. This offense is clearly not working, and instead of changing anything, our head coach is offended when asked about the quarterback change. Is this a professional football team or a clown show? I'm tired of our season being over every year by Columbus Day." And I understand the frustration, Drew, and I'm right there with you. It was a horrific performance by Justin Fields Sunday, and I question whether or not the Jets should have pulled Fields from that game because it was clear that he was rattled. And I think that the Jets could easily justify starting Tyrod Taylor this week against the Carolina Panthers because Fields' play was that bad. But I think when you're making a change like this, there are 2 questions that need to be asked. The first question is a change justified? Has the quarterback played poorly enough that he deserves to be benched? And the answer to that is yes, 1,000 times yes. The play Fields showed on Sunday was inexcusable. The second question, though, is will it improve the football team? And I think the answer to that is less clear because we saw Tyrod Taylor play a few weeks ago against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if you were upset with Fields for holding the ball too long, for taking bad sacks, well, you saw those same traits from Tyrod Taylor when the Jets played in Tampa Bay. And that was not a one-time thing. That's been one of the issues Tyrod Taylor's had through his career. That's one of the reasons that aside from a 3-year stretch in Buffalo, Tyrod Taylor has been a career backup. One thing you learn as a Jets fan through the years is it's very easy to make a change. And in many cases, changes are justified. But you also have to consider what it looks like on day 2. Does the change you're making actually improve the football team? And, we now unfortunately have a rock solid example of that when the Jets changed coaches last year. I don't think anybody could say Robert Saleh was a good head coach. I think it's obvious he deserved to be fired, but did it improve the football team? No. And you have to consider who the alternatives are here. It's Tyrod Taylor who would go in, who has a lot of the same flaws as Fields. You want to go to Brady Cook, an undrafted free agent, with this group of wide receivers? There's no chance that's going to work. There's no chance you're going to see quality play. Here's the case for Fields. One, he's historically through his career in Chicago, he's not been as bad as he's shown the last couple of weeks with the Jets. So, that's some hope for some regression to the mean, where maybe we'll see some improvement because Fields has never been good enough to be a quality starting quarterback, but he's never really been this bad. And the second thing is Fields has been kind of a roller coaster through his career, where he has some really bad performances, but he frequently follows them up with performances that are really good. Fields has less than 50 starts in his career. He has 7 starts where his QBR has improved from week to week by at least 30 points. And QBR is like an ESPN stat, and it's 1 to 100. So if you're improving week to week by 30 points, that means A, you played a really bad game the week before, and B, you played a much better game the week after. So I think like the Jets' best chance at least right now, is to stick with Fields. And that's not saying it's a good chance. Sometimes you just have really bad options. And I get why people were upset with Glenn after the game, the press conference, how he dismissed the question of whether he's making a quarterback change. And I got on him for it. I got on him for that also. But I think sometimes we have to remember that the fan base is not always the intended audience in these press conferences. I'm a Yankees fan, and I think Aaron Boone is a terrible manager. I think the Yankees should have made a change 7 years ago. But the one thing I don't agree with that Boone gets criticized for frequently is that he defends his players after terrible losses. You have to remember he's trying to manage the team, and it's difficult to run the team if you're throwing your guys under the bus in press conferences. I think sometimes coaches could diplomatically be more realistic in their assessments. But Fields, Glenn doesn't want to criticize Fields in public. I'm sure he's criticizing him in private. I mean, sometimes coaches don't criticize players who are struggling. Fans go crazy. Look, Aaron Glenn knows that Justin Fields is struggling. When Aaron Glenn says, "Oh, Fields did good things in that game," he knows that that's not true. He's just trying to be diplomatic so he doesn't lose his quarterback. Now, there is one other factor here that we can't account for. And the question is, where is Justin Fields mentally? Because we've seen this in New York before. And I think it's especially true in this city. Sometimes things really snowball on you and you become the lightning rod. The media can't stop talking about you. The fan base can't stop talking about you. It feels just kind of what's his mental state? Has he been able to bounce back, or is he kind of in a spiral? And if he is in a spiral, that might be the point where you sit him down. That might be the point where you have to make a change just for his well-being. But that's something that's up to Aaron Glenn. But one other thing I have to say is, and this is one of the things that kind of frustrates me, is I feel like we kind of lack nuance in our analysis of games sometimes, where people have to say it's either all about the quarterback or it's everybody else's fault. And in reality, most of the time, it's a combination of the two. And we talked about Fields' performance because it was terrible. There was nothing redeeming about that game that Justin Fields played. I think it's also true that nobody really played well for the Jets on offense. And I would also say I think the coaching staff has done a very poor job on the offensive side of the ball. I was thinking about this a bit yesterday. There's a fundamental question that we should have entered the season asking. And that's why, despite the physical ability and the flashes of high-end play, has Justin Fields not been able to establish himself as an NFL quarterback, as a starting NFL quarterback? And there are two things that really come to mind. One is the deeper the defense forces him to get into his progressions, the more hesitant he becomes. And there are not many traits worse than hesitancy for an NFL quarterback, because the way the passing game is designed, you have to be very precise with the timing. So you get hesitant, you're in big trouble. And number two, he's not a guy who throws with anticipation. Sometimes in the NFL, you have to throw the ball before the receiver breaks, before the receiver's open. And Fields is the kind of guy who needs to see the receiver break before he gets open. Fields' running ability was supposed to help mask some of his limitations as a passer. So I look at the way this team was constructed. There's nobody who can get quick separation aside from Garrett Wilson. The running game is very uncreative. I mean, where are the triple option concepts? Where are the eye candy, the motions, the shifts that kind of throw the defense out of position? There's none of that. I think the way this offense was conceived is very poor. And I don't understand why you would sign Justin Fields knowing his limitations and run an offense like this, which is looking a lot more like a conventional NFL offense than I was expecting. And Denver's kind of a nightmare matchup for a player like Fields with this Jets roster, because they have one of the few corners in the game, Patrick Surtain, who can erase Garrett Wilson. I wouldn't say Garrett Wilson's bad against press coverage, but against press corners who really know what they're doing, Garrett Wilson's at a big disadvantage. So he can't separate. And if Garrett Wilson can't separate, nobody else can on this offense. And I think part of the story of this game is the offense didn't function. I mean, you can go watch the film. I mean, there were throws Fields missed, and there are tight window of passes he's got to attempt, but there are an awful lot of plays where nobody's open. And on some of them, Fields should have thrown the ball away instead of take a sack, and that's on him. I'd also say, though, that this was a really, really bad receiver performance. I mean, I challenge you to watch the film on that game and tell me a receiver who looked good, a receiver who was getting consistent separation. There wasn't anybody. So that's another factor here. Is that I think we need to acknowledge that Fields is not the only problem with this offense. He may be, we can say he's problem number one, and there are clear limitations to his game, but other guys got to step up too. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, Jets unfortunately are going to be without the number one guy who could step up the next couple of weeks, Garrett Wilson. We're going to discuss what this offense will look like and try and find some reason for hope. That's as we continue here on our Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season has arrived, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, you can try player props, you can even follow the live line during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. And whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. Jets hosting the Carolina Panthers Week 7 at MetLife Stadium. The odds makers have come to their senses. This week began with the Jets as favorites, but the Panthers are now 1.5-point road favorites against the Jets. Well, if you want to get in on the action, there's no better place to do it than FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Again, visit FanDuel.com to visit the FanDuel app today and get started. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. We continue now with our weekly mailbag. Our next question, John, Garrett Wilson's out for a couple of weeks. How do you think this Jets passing game can find any sort of success without him? And what will the offense look like? I really struggle to come up with a way the Jets passing offense can succeed without Garrett Wilson. If you asked me before the start of the season who was the player the Jets could least afford to lose on either offense or defense, my answer would have been Garrett Wilson, because there's nobody who can replicate what he does. And I mean, there's nobody who's even an average receiver on this team. I mean, I think one thing that's clear is that this offseason, the few veterans the Jets brought in or kept were brought in or kept for a purpose. The Jets prioritized guys who were good locker room influences because they knew they were going with a really young roster. So they wanted good locker room guys who would take the young guys under their wing, show them how to prepare, show them how to work out, show them how to watch film. And they completely disregarded playing ability. And I think that was a big mistake. You can have guys who are actually competent players who are good locker room guys. This is not an either or. There are lots of guys in the league who are veterans who are very good locker room influences, who have some playing ability, who have some ability to produce. And I've been all over the Jets about this wide receiver position. I think that what they did made absolutely no sense. And I've talked about it the last couple of days, but when you've got a quarterback who really struggles to throw with anticipation, it is of paramount importance that you get quick separators at the wide receiver position. And the Jets brought in guys who are, first of all, kind of old. Second of all, aren't that good. And third of all, even when they were in their primes, were not separators. There is no team in the NFL where it makes sense to roster all three of Josh Reynolds, Alan Lazard, and Tyler Johnson. This offseason, the Jets should have really focused on the Jets did not have a lot of resources, and they prioritized the trenches. They drafted Armand Membu 7th overall. And I agreed with that. I felt like if you could only do one thing, try and get the offensive line into working shape, made sense. But they should have been trying to like find bargains. Okay, fine. Maybe a guy's not big. Maybe he's not dynamic after the catch. Maybe he doesn't have great long speed, but he's cheap. And maybe you find a guy who, if all they can do is separate quickly, that's what we need for Justin Fields. Instead, they just brought in a bunch of guys who can't play. There's zero upside. There was zero upside with this receiver room entering the season. The only guy who's young is Arian Smith. And I don't want to get on Arian Smith too badly because, he didn't choose to be drafted where he was drafted. But when the Jets drafted him, my thought was, this is a guy who was like an undrafted UDFA caliber player. And I have to say, through 6 weeks, he looks like a guy who's a UDFA caliber player who should be developing on a practice squad. And it's not his fault he's been thrown into this situation where he's essentially a starter now, but you see, he's not ready to play. So I don't know where the Jets are going to get quality receiver play. And this is a big problem because the quarterback's lacking confidence right now. And going back to what we talked about in the first segment, if you're talking about the case for benching Fields, is I don't know that like Fields in a slump right now. Fields, who really needs some help, is going to get the help that he needs from his receiver position. I mean, in a situation like this where the quarterback's really down, what you want is you want like that number one receiver who he can trust, he can kind of like go to work things out. And he just lost that guy because Garrett Wilson's now going to miss a couple of weeks. We're probably not going to see Garrett Wilson until the bye week. So it is going to be really hard. I think the only answer for the Jets that I can come up with is they are really going to have to lean into the run game. This is a good Jets team that's going to have to run for like 200 yards a game going forward without Garrett Wilson. And that means, better concepts in the run game from Tanner Engstrand. And, like one of the things that I don't think is we talked about enough, and I don't think anybody's really talking about this enough from the Denver game, is how poorly the Jets ran the football, because all the focus is on how badly Fields threw it. And I understand that because Fields threw the ball terribly, or didn't throw the ball, but if this Jets offense can't run the ball, they're not going to succeed. And they did not run the ball against Denver. And, part of it's run blocking. Part of it's like the Broncos didn't have to respect the pass, but part of this is there's just a lack of creativity in the run game. If you want to be a run heavy team, you've got to be able to, throw some disguise in it. You have to throw in some triple option concepts. One of the key things, one of the things you must know about the NFL is that teams throwing the ball are more effective than teams running the ball. And a big part of that is when you're throwing the ball, you have 5 options. So you can just find a good quarterback will find the weakest part of the defense and throw the ball there. The entire field is at your disposal. In the run game, it's typically a running back getting the ball. And maybe has 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 holes he can run through. But when you have a quarterback capable of running the ball, it adds an extra option. You have 2 options, and you can even run like a triple option and add a third option to the play. It's not going to make your run game as dynamic as the pass game, but it can at least bridge the gap if you're a team that struggles throwing the football. And you can do things like you can use motions to kind of throw the defense off. You motion a guy from left to right to force the defense to shift. And then you run the ball in the opposite direction. And maybe you get somebody out of position. You're able to pop a big run. These are the things the Jets need to do because the passing game is going to be an issue with Fields at quarterback, and the passing game is going to be an issue without Garrett Wilson out there. There's no quality at the receiver position. The only skill I can see that the Jets prioritize this offseason at the receiver position is blocking. Because you heard the phrase throughout the offseason, no block, no rock. I mean, yeah, it's nice if a receiver can block, but receiver blocking is not very important. They're college teams that never throw the ball. They're college teams that run the option, and that's the staple of their offense. And okay, for them, maybe receiver blocking is important, but in the NFL, you're going to throw the ball. Like a 60% run rate is an extreme in the NFL. If you run the ball 60% of the time, you are at like the far end as an outlier. You're still throwing the ball 40% of the time. So, I don't know how the Jets are going to be able to get enough from the passing game. I guess the run game is just going to have to take over. That's a huge ask because in today's NFL, it's really difficult when you're that one-dimensional in the run game. Garrett Wilson could at least give you something in the passing game. I think Jets are going to need some like real outlier performances without Garrett Wilson in there for this offense to have any degree of success. I think that it's going to be tough. Our next question: injuries are a part of the NFL. Enter Garrett Wilson. Even if Wilson was healthy, wouldn't it be best to trade our players like Breece Hall before the trade deadline? Also, draft picks are a crapshoot if we're thinking round 4 or later. What are your thoughts of player trades? even with a healthy Wilson, shouldn't we try to add to our wide receiver room versus a 2026 fourth or fifth rounder? You don't see many player trades in the NFL. I think part of the challenge is it's very difficult. There's just not a lot of depth in this league. There are very few teams that have depth at any given position. And it's even harder to like match up my weakness with your weakness where okay, you need a running back. I need a wide receiver. There aren't many teams where you're going to be able to match that up where teams are just overflowing with depth. I think in theory, yeah, player for player trades make sense, but you don't see that often in the NFL. I think that's the big reason. It's just like, it's very difficult to find a match that my strength is your weakness and your weakness is my strength. Not easy to do. I do think part of it's there's a conservatism in the NFL where if I trade a player for a draft pick, everybody kind of forgets about that. If I trade a player for a player and the guy I give up is way better than the guy I get criticized. I may get fired as a GM. So I think there's an element to that. But I think it's tough. Should the Jets trade their players? I keep going back and forth with Breece Hall. Next week, my answer may be different. I mean, I've said there have been weeks where I've said trade him. There are weeks where I've said hold on to him. I'm at the point where just like this Jets team doesn't have enough good players. And I don't know part of the challenge is I don't know what Breece wants in a contract. Some people have suggested he wants top 5 money, but I don't buy that. I mean, what's Breece Hall done to earn top 5 money? I think if Breece wants a reasonable contract, I'd really consider bringing him back at this point because like Jets just don't have enough good players. So, I think but I do think the Jets should be trading anybody who's not going to be here next year. Get whatever you can for them. If it's a late round pick, it's a late round pick. It's better than losing them for nothing. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the frustration of the fan base. Should this fan base stop supporting this team financially until we start seeing improvement? Well, I have some thoughts on why that might not work, and I'll give them. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I just used Game Time last week. I went to the Jets game in London against the Denver Broncos. It was so easy. I mean, it was just a couple of minutes I was able to check out. I also like that they give you the price you're going to pay. No hidden fees. It makes life so much simpler. No surprises when you check out. And you can check out Game Time for this Sunday against Carolina. The Jets are obviously not very good. If you want to go to the game, there are some great deals to be had. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Wednesday, we're doing our weekly mailbag show. Our next question, John, is it time for a fan boycott? Somebody has to send this owner a message that what's happening is unacceptable. I will never tell people how to support the team, how to spend their money. If you are a longtime ticket holder and you are frustrated, you are under no obligation to continue supporting the team. If you're upset with the state of this franchise, you do whatever you want. But I also can't say you're wrong if you want to go to games right now. If you go to games, use our partner Game Time because I did use them to get a really good ticket in London to see the Jets take on the Broncos. But NFL tickets are so expensive these days, and when the Jets are really bad, ticket prices go down. And sometimes, you may not be able to, some people may not be able to afford to take their kids to a game under normal circumstances, but with the Jets this bad, maybe this is like the opportunity you get. And I mean, when I was a kid, the first game I went to was during the 1-15 Rich Kotite season. It was Thanksgiving weekend. It was a game against the Houston Oilers, and they just got annihilated. And it was still a really good memory for me. My uncle got the tickets as a Christmas present, and looking back, I now realize that he got those tickets from a coworker for free because the coworker just didn't want to go to the game. But I had a really good memory. And, if you want to take your kids to a game, I think that they'll really treasure the memory. Some people, it's like a family event. You go with your parents, you go with uncle and aunt, you go with your cousins, brother, sister, and tailgating is an experience. So I can't tell you you're wrong if you want to go to the games. I went to a game last year with my father, Thanksgiving weekend against Seattle, which was a horrible loss, but still a very nice memory. So I think you have to support the team or not support the team, however you choose. And if you're frustrated and you don't want to watch a game and you've been a diehard fan for years, I can't say you're wrong. You have to do things in life. Life is too short. You have to do things that bring you enjoyment. Would a boycott work? I mean, I'm a skeptic on that, which actually leads us into our next question, which is from Dan, who writes, John, this may be controversial. Do you think fan apathy might actually be a good thing for this franchise? Like, it would be better if people just did not care about the team being bad, opposed to everybody flipping out about it. With Woody as the owner, I can't help but think the fan noise has an outsized influence on his decision-making. Woody's not a good owner, and he often acts rashly in response to outside/fan noise. An apathetic fan base might be less noisy, but it actually might give the franchise some breathing room to get out of the basement. That's very aspirational, Dan. I don't know that anything can fix what's wrong with this team without new ownership. I think that if fans are apathetic, the most likely scenario is that this owner will make a move to try and get the Jets back on the back pages, get the Jets back into the conversation. So I don't know that it's going to work, because this is an owner who has been around for 2.5 decades, been around for a quarter century, and he has shown zero willingness to learn. He has shown zero interest in learning. He does show zero capability to learn. I'm at the point where until Woody Johnson shows some signs of progress, I have very little reason for optimism about this ownership situation. And the thing that's distressing for me is it's not just that he's not learning, it's that he's getting worse as we go along. You may be surprised to hear this, but the first decade or so of Woody Johnson's ownership, I defended him, because the team was actually pretty good most years, and they made a lot of trips to the playoffs, which culminated in the 2 trips to the AFC Championship game under Rex Ryan in 2009 and 2010. And people got on Woody. They said he was cheap, and they said he's a bad owner. And I defended him the first decade because the results were pretty good. And ever since 2011, we have seen bad results, and we just kept getting worse and worse. And the owner's performance has gotten worse and worse. I mean, the worst Woody Johnson's moments were in 2023 and 2024. This is the point where he should have learned how to be an NFL owner. And it's not just that we're not seeing a lack of improvement. It's that we're seeing him actually make worse decisions the deeper we get into his tenure. So I'm just past the point. Like, if maybe he surprises me. I mean, certainly, like, sometimes people change at random points, but we haven't seen any sort of change from Woody to this point in time. So it makes me feel really pessimistic about this ownership. I mean, I hope that maybe the Jets can run into a good season at some point, where maybe they just have a decent enough roster and they run into the right schedule and get some injury luck. But in terms of building a long-term winner, I don't really know where to go at this point. I think my only optimism about building a long-term winner is that maybe the Jets at some point hire the right coach by accident. Somebody like Aaron Glenn, who was a former player, who was a really big buzz hire, and maybe that's how it works out. But I'm unfortunately past the point of feeling like there's anything to feel good about with ownership. If anything was going to work with this ownership, it probably would have worked already, and we haven't seen any reasons for success. You look at New England last year, where they were one and done with Gerard Mayo. It was a terrible decision by Robert Kraft to hire Mayo, and you can see why he did it, because near the end of Bill Belichick's tenure, Belichick's relationship with Kraft really deteriorated, and Kraft did not like Belichick personally. And Gerard Mayo was on the staff, and Gerard Mayo was nice to Kraft, and Kraft let his personal feelings get in the way of what was best for his business. The difference is, say what you will about Robert Kraft. There's a lot you can say about Robert Kraft, but he understands how to build a winning team. He realized his mistake, went on, got a really good coach in Mike Vrabel. Woody Johnson is incapable of hiring someone good. I'm convinced of that. He has no idea what he's doing, and he won't give up the power. So, I wish that there was more optimism on the ownership front, but I don't see it right now. Our last question is from Greg, who writes, John, with Fields regressing as a passer and the Jets lacking skill position players, do you think it makes sense to start utilizing him like the Saints used Taysom Hill? Tyrod could start at quarterback with Fields in the slot, or Fields could run some plays out of the Wildcat. With Fields being under contract through next season, I think it would be smart to create a role for him where he could make an impact, even if they bring in another starter next season. I understand the thought process behind it, but my impression is that it probably would not work. I think most of these conversion projects don't work in the NFL. I think it's one thing to move a guy from tackle to guard, or from corner to safety, or safety to linebacker. where, you're doing a lot of the same things you're accustomed to doing, but Justin Fields has never run routes. Justin Fields has never gotten the ball as a running back. Taysom Hills are great when they work out, but the vast majority of them fail. And there's another aspect to this that's really important, is that for this to work, Justin Fields would have to buy into the role. There were a million reasons the Tebow thing was never going to work out in New York. And this is probably at the bottom, but one of the things that doesn't get discussed is Tebow never bought into his role in New York. He wanted to be the starting quarterback. He thought he was going to take the job from Mark Sanchez and win Super Bowls here. And he never bought into the idea he was going to be a part-time player and a special teamer and a guy who, played some tight end and played some wide receiver. It just was never. And I don't think Fields is going to be willing to do it. And, you can say, well, he's a player, he has to do what he's told. It's one thing to do it. It's another thing to do it with the effort it would require to be successful. If Fields is told he has to go play wide receiver, he's going to do it because he has to, but is he going to put the work in to become a great wide receiver? The answer is no. And I'm not sure he has the skills to do it anyway, because, if you're talking about Fields as like a runner, I don't think Fields makes great reads as a runner. I mean, the first sack on Sunday, he had a lane he could have taken off through and gotten a nice gain. Instead, he bounced outside and took a sack. So I understand the mindset behind it, but I'm a skeptic that it would actually work in practice. I think it's one of those things. Sometimes things sound great on paper, but they don't really work when you implement them. And I feel like that might be the situation with Fields, changing his role. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and you're listening on the podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll be chatting with Julian Council of Locked On Panthers. It'll be crossover Thursday. You won't want to miss it.